I'm Christi Anne Bela, intimacy architect. I help people to build a life they love with better boundaries. Boundaries is a word we hear a lot thrown around these days, especially in the wake of things like the Me Too and Time's Up movement. So what does it mean when we talk about boundaries? Well, boundaries are the way in which we set guidelines for how we want to be treated and how we interact with others. This is why boundaries are tricky, because we often don't know that our boundaries have been violated until after it's happened. So, how do we navigate this? This happened to me recently when I was out to lunch with someone. They pulled out their phone and showed me this really gross picture. And in that moment, I realized, well, I have a couple of new boundaries. One, no phones out during mealtime. And two, I definitely want to be asked before I'm shown a picture. So, how do we go about beginning to set better boundaries? Well, we can learn to catch. Catch is an acronym that I came up with while I was juggling two jobs. One was working with children on the autism spectrum, and the other was working with newly divorced adults trying to navigate the dating world. And surprisingly, they both had something in common. They were both trying to figure out how to understand and communicate their boundaries. And this is where it hit me quite literally one day when a child threw something at me, and I realized it's really important to check in to see if someone wants to play with us before we start the game. And life is a game after all. So, before we dive deeper into catch, I invite you to take a deep breath. To close your eyes and think about a time in your life when you said yes to something you didn't really want to do. Do you remember how it felt when that question came? Did you want to cringe, and did you feel just yourself getting small? Maybe that gut feeling inside going, oh no. But despite all of those sirens going off, you just went along with it. You said something like, okay, sure, whatever, I guess. And then regretted it afterwards. What would it look like if you didn't feel bad about saying no? This is a question I've asked hundreds of people, everyone from 8 to 80, and pretty much every situation, they say the same thing. They don't know. Because boundaries are not something we're taught to think about. Until now. Essentially, we're taught to not talk about our boundaries because it might inconvenience others. But I'm here to debunk this idea. It is not selfish for you to put yourself and your boundaries before somebody else. It's actually an act of love. Now, I wasn't born with this information. In fact, quite to the contrary, my family has pretty sucky boundaries. They made me hug people I didn't want to hug when I was a kid. They are notorious for oversharing and giving unsolicited advice. My family has this idea that children should be seen and not heard. And when you think your voice is not important, it really robs you of this unique expression. And worst of all, it makes you feel like your boundaries don't matter. And this is not to say a judgment or point fingers. This is just about really observing ourselves and figuring out what this is all about. So, in this observation, we can start to create a new way to approach relationships with ourselves and each other. As Maya Angelou said, we do the best we can with what we know, and when we know better, we do better. So here are my top 5 boundary blunders that we can do better on. 1 is unsolicited advice. 2 is getting physical. 3 is unclear communication. 4 is people-pleasing. And 5 is oversharing. I'm guessing at some point or another, we've all done one of these. I know I certainly have. And at the time, I didn't really see what the big deal was, giving somebody advice or patting someone on the back. We often don't think of these everyday experiences as being based in boundaries, but they are. These are the small ways that we are either building love and trust in our lives, or we're creating barriers out of fear that drive wedges between us. I have to tell you that since I've been more aware of my boundaries, I have more time and energy to do the things I love because I only say yes if I mean it. I have healthy relationships with the people in my life, and I have more respect for myself. Boundaries have made my life better, and I know they can do the same for you. So let's get ready to catch. Catch works just like playing a real game. It reminds us to pause and think about what's being thrown at us or what we're tossing in somebody else's direction. This way we can really get clear and we can focus on how to navigate what we're receiving or what we're giving, whether it's words or physical. The same rules apply. We model it, we try it, and before you know it, everyone's playing along. So we'll start with C. C is for connection. How do you connect to yourself first? It is the first relationship you have, the most important one. It's the one with you. If you are connected to yourself, and by connected, I mean really here to feel and know what you're experiencing, to be clear on what you need, then you're really likely to say yes only to the things that you truly want to do. When we are disconnected, we tend to overextend ourselves and we get exhausted and resentful. Those are the moments when we don't want to be mean or selfish, but we end up feeling terrible because we gave away more than we had. Let's face it, if you're tired or hungry, you really lose the ability to make good choices. So we have to remember to prioritize our connection to ourselves. Just like they say on the plane, you put your mask on first before you help anyone else. So how are you showing up to help you? I like to prioritize myself every day with a few minutes of meditation or maybe walking my dog, just some time for me. So I encourage you to take care of yourself first. Take the time to make that number one connection to you. It is the most important relationship you have. Then we want to take note. We want to notice those moments when something feels good or off so we can really be clear in the future about expressing what is or isn't working for us. Now we come to A. A is for association, or if you want to think of it as like the relationship status. Are you acquaintances, allies, adversaries? How are you connecting to the people around you? Are you the boss? Is this your bestie? Are you keeping it casual, or were you hoping someone was going to put a ring on it for you? These are the things we want to think about. How are we in relationship? How can we get clear on that relationship? I know so many people get caught off guard because they were dating someone and they thought it was really exclusive, but it turns out it wasn't, because they never really had that conversation. They weren't clear and they found out the other person didn't feel the same way. It's important to be honest about what you want from a relationship, whether it's a working relationship, a friendship, a romantic connection. It is equally important to be clear on what you are able to give. How much time do you have? How much do you have to contribute? Where do you draw the line on the time or the energy you want to share? T is for talking. My grandma always says it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I'll add to that it's also making sure someone is ready to hear it. Consent and boundaries go together like hand in glove. They really complete and complement each other. So consent in a conversation may seem obvious when it comes to something big about sex, but what about little things? What about even getting consent to have a conversation? Now, I know it might seem strange, this idea of asking someone if you can talk to them, but think about it. How many times have you or your partner come in and just started talking and downloading things, and the next thing you know, you realize that that person wasn't really listening? Or you get ready to go to bed and your partner suddenly wants to have this big dramatic conversation, and you're just not really in a space to be there for that. If you want to communicate clearly, have consent to have the conversation. This is a great way to ensure everyone is heard and ready to listen. When I need to talk to somebody about something challenging, like my boundaries being crossed, I sandwich. Sandwiching provides this buffer of feedback and this acknowledgement before I ask for a behavior modification. The first piece is gratitude, reflecting on what is working, and then I find they're more likely to tune in and not feel attacked. They're ready to receive what I have to say. And the second part is getting to that request to make the suggestion or ask for what it is I need. And I follow it up with expression of appreciation of how important it is and how much I understand that these vulnerable talks can be challenging, and offer them an opportunity to tell me how they're feeling. As awkward as you think it might be to have these conversations, it is always way worse if things go unsaid. So get consent for the type of conversations you want to have. Now let's talk about one of the hardest words to say when it comes to boundaries. No. I am a cheerleader for no. I encourage you to say no and to see no as an opportunity. It is a redirection, not a rejection. No is a chance to pass on purpose. When I say no, it gives someone else a chance to show up. It gives someone else a chance to show their purpose. I have no regrets about saying no, but I've definitely had regrets about not saying no. No is an exercise in trust that strengthens our authenticity. And here's the biggest game changer I learned about saying no, is to say thank you when someone says no. I have gratitude when people say no because I can trust them. I know they are being honest and taking care of themselves. Nothing feels worse than when someone who has said yes to something they didn't really want to do. It's like as if I was stealing from someone, only I didn't know it because they were giving away what they didn't have. Most importantly, no is a complete sentence. And anything less than your authentic, enthusiastic yes is a no. So that means maybe is a no. If you're a maybe, sit with it, breathe into it, ask more questions. Give yourself some time to really be clear. Practice letting no be the default. The best thing about no is it leads you to moments and people that are a yes, and that makes for epic adventures. The second C is for checking in. When we want to check in along the way, because consent and boundaries is an ongoing conversation. Checking in is important. You want to check in with yourself. You want to check in with the people around you. Did you change your mind? Maybe somebody else did. Maybe something came up. We all need to feel heard and feel safer in our situations. If we can check in now and then to see how we're doing, to see how other people are doing, especially in moments when we tend to go on autopilot, because it's then when we sometimes forget and we just need to remember that we all have permission to change our minds, even in the middle of something. There can always be some new circumstance that comes up. So knowing that your boundaries can be drawn in pencil and you have the permission to take them back at any time. Checking in helps us to be clear on what is working. H is another one that kind of came to me both from working with kids on the spectrum and dating adults. They kind of had the same complaint. People were always trying to touch them without them wanting to, whether it was just something friendly like a handshake or a hug. So think about the intention behind your action. Think about what it is you're looking for. Do you feel like you're just doing it because you're supposed to? Are you trying to get closer to someone? Do you feel like that only way to feel affection or attention is through touch? What is it that you really need? And is this the appropriate time or place for that? The intention or energy behind our actions matters. I've been talking about this for years, but it seems more important now than ever that we begin our interactions with one another without touch. So let's say H stands for head nod. It's a good way to start interactions, to acknowledge one another with a head nod, and then we can ask, we can invite and get clarity on what kind of touch is welcome. Since we're talking about touch, it's time to talk about sex, because we're all here as a result of sex. So empowering people to talk about sex really equips them to have safer sexual experiences. What if instead of having these awkward conversations, talking about sex and consent could be foreplay? Talking about sex doesn't have to ruin the mood. It can be fun and flirty. So let's get real for a moment. If you're too embarrassed to talk about it, are you really ready to do it? When it comes to intimacy, talk about what you like. Get clear and specific. Define things, because we all have a different view on what things mean. Discussions and full disclosure are your friends. And safer sex is not just about condoms. It's a safer space, emotionally, mentally, physically, energetically. It's really knowing your needs and the comfort level of what is working for you, whether that's touch or talking. So starting with a head nod and inviting touch from there. Healthy boundaries are what set us up for success. The ability to say yes and no when we mean it and not feel bad about it. So let's recap. C is for connection. Take care of yourself first. A is association. What's your relationship status? T is for talking. Be sure to get consent to communicate. And the second C is checking in. What's new? How are things going? And finally, our H for the head nod, heading us in to how we're going to connect. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you feel empowered and understand what your boundaries are, to take the time to know more about your boundaries. The more you know about your boundaries, the easier they are to talk about. And the more we talk about our boundaries, the better our relationships can be with others. I'm Christi Anne Bela, intimacy architect, and you just caught on to catch.